Hey everybody, welcome to the 5th edition of Viral Vocabulary. So today I wanted to share a story. When I was in high school, I had a Spanish teacher who was one of my heroes. She was this 5'2", silver-haired dynamo of energy and intellect and compassion, and she inspired me as a human being, and I loved her. She was an amazing person, and she made a big difference in my life. Well, when I got to my senior year, I was struggling with some personal issues, and I began having a hard time kind of keeping up with my schoolwork, and her class was the class that suffered. And so there was this big project that came up toward the end of the year, and it was worth quite a few points. And so if I didn't do it, or if anybody didn't do it, they were going to be in trouble with their grade. And so everybody's lining up to turn it in on the day it was due, and I didn't have the project. And she was startled and said, well, Mark, you're almost going to graduate. I don't want this to be how we go out together. I don't want this to be our last memory of each other. I'm going to give you one more week. Make sure you turn it in on the very last day of school. I'll give you some credit for it, and we'll pick up the pieces. And I thanked her profusely and walked out the door. Well, on the last day of school, everybody was lining up to get hugs and give her cards and say their farewells, and I was the last one in line. And when I got up to her desk, she looked up at me expectantly, and I had nothing in my hands. And I'll never forget the stricken look on her face. It was grief, I think, more than anything. And she just sort of looked at me for a second and then turned away and never said a word and just went back to reading cards and grading papers. And I just sort of walked out the door. And for 10 years, that bothered me. For 10 years, that hung over my head. But here's the thing. It's not a story about a sad ending. It's a story about a profound beginning. Because from that moment forward, I started having my students write letters. I didn't want them to ever feel the way I had. And so I asked them to write a letter to a loved one and a letter to a former teacher. And I wanted them to express whatever they needed to say before they lost the opportunity. And over the course of 30 years, probably 20,000 letters poured out across the globe, literally, into our close community, but also to Japan, South Africa, Great Britain, Peru, all over the place. And the impact of those letters was immense. And so that brings me to my word of the day. Inestimable. I-N-E-S-T-I-M-A-B-L-E. Adjective. Too great to calculate or fully appreciate. Synonyms might be priceless or invaluable if the original definition seems too fuzzy. Now here's where I usually talk about etymology, but not today. Today I want to get right to the application of the word. We inherently doubt the power of our words to make a difference in people's lives. Oh, I've already told them how I feel, they know what I think, or I don't know what to say, or oh, it's going to sound stupid, or oh, if I get gushy, it's going to be uncomfortable, or oh, I suck as a writer, I don't know what to say or how to say it. But I can tell you from personal experience, the impact of your words is inestimable. I don't think I fully realized how important our words were until I watched the impact that all those letters my 13-year-old students wrote had on the community and the world. I had one parent who called me sobbing so hard he could hardly catch his breath. But finally, when he composed himself, he said, I always knew my son loved me. But when I read that letter he wrote, I broke down in tears. And it is now the most precious possession I have. I had one young lady who wrote to her mom, and she said to her Mom, you're the most amazing human being I've ever known in my life. And once I have kids of my own, I want them to know their grandma, because you've changed my life, and I know you'll change theirs, but I'm worried about your health. The same day she read that letter, that young lady's mother quit smoking. And 2 months later, she was running half marathons. I even had one young man who wrote to his grandfather and said, Grandpa, you're my best friend. We used to go for walks in the park and play and just talk to each other for hours on end. But ever since your knees have gotten bad, it's like I've lost my best friend. I never see you. 1 month after reading that letter, his grandfather got a double knee operation. And the mom of that young man who wrote the letter called me and said that letter changed our family's lives. I'm still in awe of those letters of love that my students sent out and the impact that they had. So today, I'm issuing the Love Letter Challenge. It's sort of like the Ice Bucket Challenge, but less risk of hypothermia and a lot less soggy. You know, I don't mean love letter in the traditional sense, though, of course, right? I mean love as in the unselfish concern for the welfare of others. Perhaps even better yet, the verb form, to thrive, as in plants love sunlight. Because isn't that what allows all of us to thrive? Love. And what better way to express our love than through our words? So for the Love Letter Challenge, I want you to think of somebody in your life who needs to hear or read your words. Whether it's to tell them you love them, or to apologize, or to thank them, or comfort them if they're suffering in some way. It could be somebody unexpected, your doctor, or a coach, or a next door neighbor. Or it might be somebody who lives with you, a parent, a sibling, a grandparent, an extended family member who doesn't live with you but is connected to you by blood. Or maybe even a teacher, past or present, but especially present. Because I can tell you, there are teachers across this state who are grieving the loss of the school year and their ability to walk into a classroom every day to see their students. I see that grief in my wife's eyes every day, whose last day with her beloved students was a random Thursday in March. It's breaking her heart. So whoever you're thinking of, whether they're 6 feet away or 6,000 miles away, your words could change their life. You know, I came up with 10 years of excuses why I couldn't write that letter to my former teacher. But finally, after a decade, I thought, all right, I'm going to write her an apology letter. I'm going to try to reconstruct things and make it right. And so I sat down, poured my heart out, just wrote her this 6-7 page letter, thanking her, telling her I loved her, telling her that I was sorry for hurting her so deeply, especially now that I was a teacher and I recognized the pain that I must have caused her by letting her down so much. And so finally I drove it over to the high school and I dropped it off in the main office and I said, could you give this to my teacher? And the secretary said, oh, well, I'm new here and, I don't know that person and, they just retired last year. So I'll make sure to get it to wherever they're living now. I'm sure there must be a forwarding address around somewhere. So I drove home euphoric, thinking, finally, first step toward maybe redeveloping the relationship, repairing the damage. And I sat down and I was just sitting in my living room reading the newspaper like I always did and thumbing through the editorials and the comics and the sports section. And all of a sudden I found my way to a section that I never read, but for some reason that day my fingers found their way there. And it was the obituary section. And the day I dropped off that letter for my teacher is the day I found out she had died. I can't tell you the level of grief I felt. It was as if a part of my stomach had been pulled out of my body forcibly, and I sat there weeping at all those opportunities I had to tell her how much she meant to me, and that I never took. So I lost my chance. Don't lose yours. I know we all have our hands full right now. I know we're all busy with so many different things, but here's the thing. I was just looking at a friend's Facebook page the other night, and it was about 2 a.m, and he said, I'm running a fever and I've got a lot of the symptoms of COVID, and so I need to tell you all how I feel. And he wrote 1,400 words on his Facebook page to the people he loved, thanking them, telling them that he loved them. It was the most incredible thing because he wasn't sure he'd ever have another chance. So we all have this moment in time. We all have those people we care about. Let's take advantage of it. You know, Emily Dickinson once said, "I know nothing in the world that has as much power as a word. I write one and I look at it until it begins to shine." If one word can do that, imagine what a whole bunch of them strung together can do. And you don't have to be Emily Dickinson for your words to shine. So let your viral vocabulary spread across the world, whether it's in an email or a private message on Facebook or the longest text in history. Lift somebody's spirits, heal a wound, tell somebody you're grateful, maybe even save a life. The impact of your love letters will be inestimable. So stay safe, stay healthy, and even after all this COVID craziness is over, let's continue to look out for one another. Let's continue to show an unselfish concern for the welfare of others. Let's continue to love each other. See you next time.